When Ryan called the land worthless, I knew it was the beginning of something he'd never be able to undo. I can still hear the words echoing in my head, like they were carved into the air itself. It wasn't the words that stung so much as the finality in his tone, the way he had already decided. Standing there in the doorway, his face hardened with a certainty that made my chest tighten, Ryan didn't just question the value of the land, he was dismissing everything it meant to me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you said are listening from. I've spent my life building this land into something more than just dirt and trees. It was my legacy, the sum of my sacrifices, my blood, sweat, and the things I could never say aloud. I fought for this land in more ways than Ryan could ever understand. But that didn't matter to him. All that mattered was a quick sale, a way out of the suffocating grip of a father's expectations. You're holding on to a dead weight, Dad. This place, this land, it's worthless. It's nothing. Ryan's voice trembled with a mix of frustration and arrogance. It hit me like a punch in the gut. My own son, the one I raised, the one I fought for, was trying to strip away everything that had ever defined me. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I couldn't bring myself to shout at him, to fight back in the way I wanted to. No, I knew this moment wouldn't be won with words. The betrayal wasn't just in the sale he was trying to make. It was in the belief that this land didn't matter, that everything I had done for it, and everything it represented, was irrelevant. I stood still, looking past him at the fields, stretching endlessly before me, the old barn in the distance. This land wasn't just soil, it was a living part of my story. It was where I'd buried parts of myself no one would ever understand, where I'd trained men, where the quiet murmurs of my military past still lingered in the shadows. Before I could answer, Ryan continued, his words cutting deeper. Seth already found someone, Dad. They still pay for it. You cept you're getting old in this land. Cept's just weighing you down. That was it. The tipping point. Ryan didn't just want to sell the land, he wanted to sell me out. I felt the anger build up in my chest, but there was no room for it now. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about something far deeper, something that ran through every vein in my body. My own son didn't know me at all. He didn't understand the gravity of what he was about to destroy. Before we continue, I said, my voice controlled but heavy with the weight of the moment, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're listening from. It means more than you know. As I turned away from Ryan, I could feel his gaze burning into my back. I didn't care. What he had just said wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of everything this land had stood for. I had protected it for years, kept it hidden, kept its secrets, but Ryan didn't see that. To him, it was just an old, forgotten piece of property. No value, no history. I walked toward the barn, each step feeling heavier than the last. I could still smell the old wood, hear the creaks of the floorboards beneath me. I reached for the lock on the old chest where I kept the documents. The real documents, the ones no one knew about. The ones that would show Ryan exactly how wrong he was. I pulled out the old military maps, the handwritten journals, the contracts sealed in faded envelopes. These were the things Ryan would never understand. These were the things that tied me to this land in ways he couldn't possibly grasp. I wasn't just fighting for a piece of land. I was fighting for my honor, for everything that had been buried here. Memories, secrets, a history that Ryan couldn't see. The land wasn't set worthless. It was priceless. I walked back to the house, the weight of the documents in my hands grounding me. I wasn't going to let him sell it. I wasn't going to let him destroy everything I had worked for. If Ryan wanted to call it worthless, then it was time I showed him just how wrong he was. And if I had to break my own heart to do it, so be it. The betrayal had ignited something inside me, something I'd kept hidden away for too long. If Ryan wanted to tear apart everything I had built, then I'd make sure he never forgot what he was about to lose. I didn't sleep that night. I don't even remember trying. My mind kept racing, replaying Ryan's words over and over again. Worthless, dead weight. I kept hearing the anger in his voice, the belief that everything I had worked for was meaningless, and all I could do was stare at the ceiling, the quiet ticking of the old clock on the wall echoing in the stillness. There were days when I could feel my body failing me, aching joints, The shortness of breath that wasn't just from age but from something deeper. The land had always been my anchor, the one thing that kept me from drifting into the quiet void of nothingness. But now Ryan's betrayal threatened to take that away too. I didn't have the strength to confront him again. Not today. Not this time. Instead, I picked up the phone. I called Evelyn. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice soft but filled with a kind of concern I could never escape. She knew something was wrong. "Evelyn, I need you to come over," I said, my voice rough, barely above a whisper. She didn't hesitate. "I said I'll be there in an hour." An hour. It felt like an eternity. When she arrived, the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She could see it. The weight of the world was on my shoulders, and I was crumbling under it. "Ryan?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp, like she already knew the answer. "He keeps trying to sell it," I said, my words barely holding together. "He called it worthless, Evelyn. He doesn't sept get it. He doesn't sept understand what it means." Evelyn sat down beside me. Her hand on my shoulder felt like a lifeline. I didn't deserve her loyalty. After everything that had happened, the distance between us, the things I had done, but she was still here. Still fighting for me, for this family. "You know what this land means to you," she said, her voice steady, comforting. "But Dad, it's not just about the land, is it? It's about everything that's come before, your whole life. All that sacrifice." I could feel the tears welling up, the tightness in my throat. I'd never been good at showing my emotions. I thought if I kept them buried long enough, they wouldn't matter. But they always found a way out. They always found a way to creep up when I least expected it. "No," I whispered. "It's about what I seps given up for this family, for him, for Ryan. For Ryan," I looked at Evelyn, my voice thick with emotion. "I didn't seps just sacrifice my life in the military. I sacrificed everything I could have been for them, for Ryan." Evelyn didn't say anything for a moment. She let me say it, let the weight of the confession hang in the air. Then she gently turned me to face her. "You can't keep carrying this alone, Dad. You have to let go of the guilt. Let go of the pain. But this Ryan's betrayal, it's not just about you, it's about the family. And you have to fight for it." I closed my eyes, the exhaustion heavy in my bones. But what if I lose him too? What if everything I done ends up tearing us apart? Evelyn squeezed my shoulder. "You already lost him, Dad. He made his choice. But you still have a chance to protect what matters. Not just the land, but the legacy." I knew she was right. The longer I let Ryan play his game, the more I stood to lose. I couldn't afford to wait anymore. I had to act. The betrayal had already started, and there was no going back. But the question was, could I do this without losing everything else in the process? I looked down at the table, the weight of the documents I had gathered pressing against my palms. They were just pieces of paper, but they represented something far bigger, something Ryan could never understand. They were the key to everything. The land's true value, the secrets buried beneath it, and the way I was going to make him pay. As the clock ticked on, I knew there was no going back. The plan was forming in my mind. Slowly but surely, I couldn't let Ryan get away with this. I wouldn't. I spent the next few days in a kind of numb daze, the world moving in slow motion around me. My body was growing weaker, but my resolve, my need to set things right, was stronger than ever. Ryan's betrayal weighed on me, but it wasn't just the land he was trying to sell. It was everything we had built, everything we had lost along the way. I wasn't about to let him take that away. Not now. I couldn't face him again, not yet. So I did what I'd always done when things seemed out of control. I made a plan, a good one that would hurt him without me lifting a finger. I didn't need to play by his rules. I had the advantage of knowing what he didn't, the real value of the land. That's when I called Samuel. He was the only one who knew the full history of the land, the secrets buried here that Ryan had no clue about. Samuel had been my military colleague, a brother in arms, and over the years he'd become something more, someone I could trust, even when everything else seemed to crumble. "Sam," I said, the phone pressed to my ear, "I need your help. It's time to take this to the next level." There was a pause on the other end. Samuel knew me well enough to recognize the weight in my voice. What Seth's going on, Hayden? Ryan's trying to sell the land. I've tried talking to him, but it's no use. He's blinded by his own greed. I explained, my hand gripping the desk in front of me, the documents I had gathered scattered in front of me like pieces of a puzzle. But it's not just about the money, Sam. It's about the history, about everything that's buried there. I need to expose it, for him, for me. You want to take this to court? Samuel asked, his voice calm, professional. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Exactly, but I need to gather everything, documents, old contracts, anything that proves Ryan Sipp's intentions. If he Sipp's trying to sell it illegally, I said I'll make sure the whole world knows what he Sipp's done. Samuel was quiet for a moment before speaking again. I Sipp's still got contacts in the military. I can get the records for you, Aiden. You know I said'll help with whatever you need. Thank you, Sam, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I didn't have many people I could count on anymore, but Samuel had always been there when I needed him most. I start gathering everything on my end. Meet me in a week? We said'll be ready. I hung up the phone, my mind already working over the details of what had to come next. I wasn't just going to let Ryan walk away with everything. The land wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was a living testament to my time in the military, my service to this country, and the sacrifices I made along the way. And now it would be the key to taking everything from Ryan. That night, I sat in my study, pulling out the maps I had kept hidden for years. Maps of the old training grounds, the secret areas where soldiers had trained in ways the world would never know. I knew every inch of this land, every corner that had witnessed things Ryan could never imagine, and now I would use that history against him. I could feel the weight of the land pulling me back in, anchoring me to the memories of my past, but it also filled me with a sense of purpose. Ryan might not care about the land, but I did, and that's what made the difference. I had something he didn't, an understanding of what this place really meant. I started going through the old journals I had kept over the years, looking for anything that could help. One entry caught my eye. It was dated from the early 90s, just after I had left the military but was still involved in contractor work. It detailed a covert training mission that had taken place on this very land, a mission so secret that even now the government would deny its existence. I made a copy of the entry and slipped it into a folder along with other documents that supported my claim. The more I gathered, the more I realized how much Ryan had underestimated the true value of the land. This wasn't just about a piece of real estate. It was about protecting my legacy, my name, and everything that had been built here. The next step was to gather evidence of Ryan's attempts to sell the land, his communications with potential buyers. I wasn't sure how far he had gone, but I knew if he'd already made contact with someone, there would be a paper trail. I spent hours combing through old records, bank statements, anything I could find that might expose his scheme. By the end of the week, I had a small mountain of evidence. I had collected phone records, emails, even a copy of a contract Ryan had tried to draw up with a buyer. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. Samuel came over the following week, bringing with him everything I needed to prove the land's true value. He handed me a thick file of military records, photos, and documents, some of which I hadn't even seen before. They were the smoking gun I needed. They were the proof I could use to show Ryan just how wrong he was about everything. Are you sure about this, Aiden? Samuel asked, his voice filled with a rare concern. Once you expose all this, there's no going back. I looked at him, my eyes steady. I said I'm sure that's the only way to make him understand what he's set about to lose. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and late nights spent combing through old documents. Every time I thought I had everything, I would find another piece of the puzzle that needed to be put in place. This was going to be more than just a fight over land. It was going to be about making Ryan face the consequences of his actions. The plan was simple, but every step had to be executed perfectly. I'd been in enough high-stakes situations in my life to know that precision was everything. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I had already lost too much. This time I was in control. I started by getting to Ryan before he could make any more moves. I knew he'd be working on selling the land, trying to push it through quickly, thinking I was too weak to stop him, but he was wrong. He had underestimated me. One afternoon, I showed up unannounced at his apartment. The place was quieter than usual, no music blaring, no loud conversations. Ryan was sitting at his desk going through paperwork, probably more fake contracts he'd been trying to set up. When I walked in, he looked up, startled, but quickly masked it with that same cocky attitude he always wore around me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked, standing up and pretending like nothing was wrong. I closed the door behind me, locking it with a soft click. I wasn't here for small talk. "You think I don't know what you said are doing, Ryan?" I said, my voice low and steady. "You think you can just sell the land and walk away from all of this without consequences?" Ryan smirked. "I said I'm just trying to help you out, Dad. You're not getting any younger, and you don't need that land anymore. I can make it all go away for you." He didn't get it. He still thought I was the old man he could manipulate. But this wasn't about me. It was about everything he thought he could destroy just for a quick payday. "You have no idea what you said or messing with," I said, my voice rising just enough to make him take a step back. "That land is worth far more than you said or ever know, and if you try to sell it, you said'll find out just how much you have underestimated me." Ryan Sepp's face faltered for a second, but then the cocky smirk came back. "You Sepp got nothing, old man. What are you going to do? Call the cops?" I took a deep breath, calming myself. I wasn't here for a fight. I was here to plant a seed of doubt, to make Ryan realize that I wasn't just some aging veteran he could push around. "I don't need the cops, Ryan. I've got something far more powerful." I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping under my arm, the one filled with all the evidence I had collected, the fake contracts, the phone records, the emails he'd sent to potential buyers. All of it. I slid it across the desk toward him. Ryan's eyes flickered with recognition, but he didn't say anything. He picked up the folder, flipping through the documents, his hands shaking slightly as he scanned each page. The smug expression on his face started to slip away, replaced by something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. "You've been busy," he said, his voice quieter now. "What is all this?" "It sets the truth," I replied, leaning in. "You thought you could sell what wasn't past yours. You thought you could take what I built and just walk away from it. But I sep's not done yet, Ryan. I sep's done just getting started." His eyes narrowed, but I could see the panic setting in. Ryan wasn't used to being confronted like this. He was used to getting his way, to everyone just letting him do whatever he wanted. But I wasn't going to let him walk all over me anymore. "I've got the military contracts, the historical value of the land, everything you need to know about how wrong you are. And I've got the law on my side now." I paused, watching the weight of my words sink in. "If you try to go any further, I'll expose you. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been trying to do." Ryan's mouth went dry as he stared at the documents in front of him. I could see the wheels turning in his head as he realized the gravity of the situation. He thought he could escape all this with a quick sale and some money in his pocket, but he hadn't realized just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. "You wouldn't still do that," Ryan finally said, his voice losing the confidence it once had. "You wouldn't still ruin everything just to prove a point." I stood up, my back straight, every muscle tense with the weight of what I was about to do. I left without another word, leaving Ryan sitting there, stunned, holding the evidence of his own downfall. The look on his face, confusion, fear, and anger all mixed together, was exactly what I needed. I had planted the seed of doubt, and now I was going to let him stew in it. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to get physical. All I needed was for him to understand that I was in control, that he had made the mistake of underestimating me, and from now on every move he made would be watched, calculated, and turned against him. I didn't have to wait long for the next part of my plan to unfold. Within hours, I received a call from Samuel. "Aiden," he said, his voice gruff. "ISEF got the paperwork. Everything you need to prove your claim. It's Sep's all here, but we need to move quickly. Ryan Sep's not going to back down easily." I smiled to myself. Samuel was right. Ryan wasn't done yet, but neither was I. and now I had the upper hand. The next phase of the plan was always going to be the hardest. I had shown Ryan the documents, made him realize that he was in deep, but in the back of my mind I knew he wasn't going to back down without a fight. Ryan wasn't the type to admit he was wrong. He never had been. And now I could see his desperation setting in. The pressure was mounting on him, and that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't need to push him hard, I just needed to make him feel the walls closing in. And that's exactly what I was doing. I spent the next few days in silence. Ryan, of course, avoided me at all costs. He knew I had him cornered, but I could tell by the way he was moving that he was scrambling for a way out. Every time I saw him, his usual arrogance had faded. There was a nervousness in the way he looked at me, as if he knew his time was running out. But I wasn't going to make the next move. I wasn't going to strike while he was still in shock. No, I was going to let him make the next mistake. And he did. He couldn't help himself. Ryan contacted another buyer. I knew this because, as always, he was careless. I received an email notification that the land was being listed on a real estate website under a completely new listing, one that was far too high for its supposed value. The price was absurd, but what struck me was the buyer. The same buyer Ryan had tried to contact earlier. The buyer I had warned him about in my confrontation. I smiled to myself. He had just dug his own grave even deeper. I immediately reached out to Samuel. We needed to act fast, before Ryan could finalize anything. Sam, I said, my voice low, calm, I need you to get me everything on that buyer. If he gets involved in this mess, we need to know everything about him. I want records, connections, everything. Samuel Sipp's response was swift. I said he'll get it done. But Aiden, we need to be careful. If Ryan Sipp's pushing this fast, it could mean Sipp's getting desperate. I know, I said. But desperation sets a dangerous thing, Sam. And I sets him counting on it. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Samuel's contacts came through, delivering exactly what we needed. It turned out this buyer wasn't just any real estate investor. He had ties to some less than savory individuals, people who specialized in off-market deals, deals that didn't always follow the rules. I had everything I needed to show Ryan that his attempts to sell the land weren't just illegal. They were linked to people who could ruin him. I printed the documentation out, stacked it in a neat pile, and made my way to Ryan's apartment. It was time to give him one last warning. I wasn't going to let him destroy everything I had left. He needed to understand just how deep the hole he was digging for himself really was. When I walked into the apartment, Ryan was pacing back and forth. His face was drawn, tired, his usually sharp features softened by the weight of what was coming. I could tell he hadn't slept, and I could tell he was trying to keep up the front, the act he had been playing for so long. Ryan, I said, my voice calm but firm, you really need to stop this. It's Sep's over. The land, the sale, it's Sep's all going to come back on you. Ryan turned toward me, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and fear. You don't know what you you're talking about, Dad, he spat. I am not backing down. I and got everything I need to make this happen. I could see the nervousness in his eyes, the cracks in his confidence, but he was too far gone. He couldn't see the danger he was in. He didn't understand that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing him for everything he was. And it's first got proof, Ryan, I said, holding up the stack of documents. I know about the buyer, the deals you've been trying to make. I know who Yusef's been talking to. Yusef's are playing with fire, and Yusef's are about to get burned. Ryan didn't answer at first. He just stood there glaring at me, his fists clenched at his sides. I could see his mind working, trying to come up with a way to talk his way out of this. But it was too late. The pieces were already in place. He had no escape. You don't scare me, Ryan said, his voice low, though I could hear the slight tremor in it. I let out a slow breath, my voice softer now. I sap not trying to scare you, Ryan. I sap trying to make you understand. If you keep pushing this, it saps not just the land you is are going to lose. You is per gonna lose everything. The silence between us stretched out. I could see the wheels turning in Ryan's head. I knew he was starting to panic. But he still didn't fully realize the gravity of the situation. You think I care about some old military land? He asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. You think I sit and going to lose sleep over this? It sips just dirt. You sip just holding on to some outdated idea of what it was. I shook my head. No, Ryan. It sets not just dirt. It sets everything I fought for. It sets my history, my legacy. And you set's been trying to sell it off like it means nothing. But I set's not going to let you. Ryan didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, walking toward the door. I knew it was over. I had pushed him to the edge, and now he was out of options. I'll handle this my way, he muttered, his voice heavy with resentment. But you still regret this, Dad. You still see. I stood there for a moment, watching him. There was no point in arguing with him anymore. The damage had already been done. He had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. I left the apartment, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I had done what I needed to do. The next move was his, and I knew he wouldn't back down. But neither would I. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I knew Ryan was feeling the pressure. I could see it in his eyes every time we crossed paths. The once cocky arrogance had given way to something more desperate. He wasn't the same person who had stood in front of me weeks ago, dismissing everything I had worked for. Now, every time I saw him, I saw the fear creeping in, hidden just beneath the surface. It was a game now, one I had carefully planned, one I was ready to finish, but I couldn't let myself get complacent. Ryan was still dangerous, still had tricks up his sleeve. He might not have realized it yet, but the longer he fought this battle, the more he was digging his own grave. I could feel the weight of the coming confrontation, like a storm hanging on the horizon, just waiting to break. The truth was, I didn't know how far Ryan would go to save himself, but I wasn't worried. He had already made his choice, and I was determined to make him live with it. It was late in the evening when I got the call from Samuel. I had been expecting it, but that didn't stop the tight knot that formed in my chest. I had already gathered all the evidence, but now it was time to bring everything into the light. It was time for the final step. Aiden, Samuel said, his voice low and tense. It's Sep's happening. The buyer is moving forward. Ryan Sep's got the paperwork ready to go. You need to act now, or it's Seps'll be too late. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about making sure Ryan's plans came to an end. I couldn't let him get away with this, not after everything he'd done. It's pum on it, I replied, my voice steady despite the anxiety building in me. Meet me at the courthouse in the morning. We still stop this right now. I hung up the phone and sat for a moment, taking a deep breath. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. It was time to take action, to put an end to Ryan's lies, his greed, and his betrayal. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse early. I didn't tell anyone where I was going or what I was planning to do. I didn't want to risk anyone talking me out of it. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. This had gone on long enough. As I sat in the waiting area, I watched the clock ticking down, each second drawing me closer to what I had to do. Samuel arrived a few minutes later, his briefcase in hand. He gave me a quick nod as he sat down next to me. But there was no need for words. We both knew what was at stake. Everything's Sep's in order, Samuel said quietly, pulling out the folder I had been waiting for. We Sep's got everything we need. This is it. I took the folder from him, my hands steady as I flipped through the documents. I could feel the weight of them, proof of Ryan's deceit, proof of his illegal actions, and the connections he had made with people who weren't just shady. They were dangerous. Samuel had done his job well. This was the smoking gun I needed. We didn't have much time. I could feel the tension building, the anticipation of what was about to happen. The courtroom was just down the hall, and I knew Ryan was somewhere inside, preparing to finalize the deal. He had no idea that I was about to walk in and destroy everything he had worked for. When the doors to the courtroom opened, I stood up, my legs stiff but firm. This was it. There was no turning back now. Samuel walked beside me as we made our way toward the front. The judge was already seated, waiting for the proceedings to begin. Ryan was there too, sitting at the table with his lawyer, his back turned to me. He hadn't seen me yet, but I could tell by the way his shoulders tensed that he could feel my presence. He knew something was about to go wrong, but he had no idea just how bad it was going to be for him. I took my seat, Samuel beside me, and waited. Ryan glanced up for a moment, catching my eye, and for the briefest second I saw the same cocky grin that had been on his face all those weeks ago. But now there was a flicker of doubt behind it. He knew something had changed. He knew he had pushed me too far. The judge called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Ryan's lawyer spoke first, outlining the sale of the land and presenting the papers they had prepared. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for them. But I wasn't here to watch things unfold without a fight. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, the weight of the documents in my hand feeling heavier than ever. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady, calm. Your Honor, I began, I am here today to stop this sale from going through. I have evidence that shows this transaction is not just illegal but based on lies. I have proof that my son Ryan has been deliberately hiding the true value of this land, and I have documents that prove he has been in contact with individuals who have ties to criminal activity. The courtroom went silent. I could see Ryan's face change as the words sank in. The smirk had vanished completely, replaced by a look of disbelief and panic. His lawyer quickly shot him a glance, but it was too late. I handed the folder to the judge, watching as he scanned the documents. The tension in the room was palpable. Ryan's eyes darted between me and the judge, but he couldn't speak. He couldn't defend himself. The evidence was overwhelming. As the judge looked over the papers, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The moment I had been waiting for was here. The tide had turned. The judge looked up, his expression unreadable, but I knew what was coming. Mr. Ryan, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife, this sale is hereby suspended. The evidence presented today shows a clear violation of the law. You will be required to answer for your actions in a full investigation. Ryan's face drained of color. His eyes locked on mine, and for the first time I saw the fear in them. It was too late to run, too late to fix this. The courtroom was a cold, sterile place. Every sound seemed magnified. The shuffle of papers, the click of the judge's gavel, the hushed whispers from the gallery. Ryan's lawyer, standing beside him, was trying to maintain some semblance of control, but I could see the way his shoulders slumped as the evidence I'd presented settled into the air like a cloud of smoke. It wasn't over yet. I knew that this was just the beginning of the end for Ryan. The wheels had started turning, and there was no way to stop them now. Ryan's lawyer stood up, trying to salvage the situation. Your Honor, we request that these allegations be dismissed. There is no substantial proof to back up these claims. These documents are circumstantial at best, he said, his voice shaking just a little. I could see Ryan's nervous glances at his lawyer, but his posture remained stiff. He wasn't going to give up without a fight, but it was too late for that. His attempt to sell the land wasn't just illegal, it was personal, and I was ready to expose him for everything he had done. The judge didn't even look at the lawyer as he spoke. Mr. Ryan, I've reviewed the evidence, and it's clear there is enough to warrant further investigation. Your actions are not just unethical, they are unlawful. I will allow for a full investigation into these claims. This case is far from over. Ryan's face drained of color. His arrogance, once so obvious, had completely evaporated. He stood there staring at the judge, trying to process what had just happened. You can do this, Ryan muttered under his breath. I didn't this isn't what you think. The judge looked up, his gaze cold. I suggest you save your explanations for the investigation, Mr. Ryan. I watched as Ryan's world crumbled in front of him. The man who had tried to manipulate me, tried to sell everything I had worked for, was now the one in the hot seat. He was no longer in control. I knew I could have said something, taunted him, gloat over my victory, but there was no satisfaction in seeing his panic. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. This was about justice. Ryan had crossed a line, and he was going to pay for it. But as I looked at him, I realized something else. This wasn't just about the land or the money. This was about the trust that had been shattered, the years of father and son that had been torn apart over greed. And no matter what happened in the courtroom, that damage was already done. Ryan sat back down, his face tight with frustration. His lawyer, looking helpless, leaned in to whisper something in his ear, but Ryan shook him off. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. I stood there still, my hands resting on the table in front of me. I hadn't been this calm in years. The planning, the patience, the careful steps, it was all coming to fruition. I had spent months putting everything in place. But this moment, this courtroom revelation, was the culmination of everything. And for the first time, I felt like I had control over my own fate again. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. US made a lot of mistakes, Ryan, I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of everything I had been holding back. But this one sip's going to cost you more than you realize. Ryan looked up at me, his eyes narrowing. You think you Sep won, don't statue? You think you Sep destroyed me? I shook my head. I didn't set destroy you. You did that yourself. You just didn't set realize how far you were willing to go to get what you wanted. Ryan's face flushed with anger. But there was nothing he could do now. The damage was done. The evidence was in the hands of the judge, and there was no escaping the truth. The judge banged his gavel, signaling the end of this phase of the trial. This case is adjourned. Mr. Ryan, you will be notified of the next steps in the investigation. Until then, you are required to remain in the jurisdiction. Do not attempt to sell the land or take any further action until the matter is resolved. The room was quiet as everyone stood, the tension thick in the air. I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The hardest part was over, but the real battle was only just beginning. Ryan had made his play, but now he was trapped in the consequences of his actions. And I was going to make sure he understood exactly how far he had pushed me and how far I was willing to go to protect what mattered most. As I walked out of the courtroom, Samuel met me outside. His face was grim but approving. He had been by my side throughout this entire ordeal, offering his expertise and support when I needed it most. Well done, Aiden, he said, his voice quiet but filled with admiration. You did it. I nodded, my mind still processing the events that had just unfolded. His sep's not over yet, Sam. Ryan Sep's still got a few cards to play, but we've got the upper hand now. Samuel clapped me on the back. That Sep's the first real step toward making sure he never gets away with this. We walked in silence for a moment, the weight of the courtroom still hanging heavy in the air, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The land was safe. My legacy was safe, and as much as I had fought for this moment, the satisfaction of seeing Ryan realize the extent of his mistakes was far more than I had expected. I wasn't done yet, but I was closer than I had ever been. The days that followed were nothing like I imagined they would be. You always think that when you win, there's a moment of relief, a moment where the tension breaks and everything falls into place. But the truth is, victory doesn't feel like you expect it to. It feels empty. It feels hollow. The weight of what's been lost, what's been damaged, sits heavy in your chest. Ryan's name was everywhere in the news now. The story of his fraudulent attempts to sell the land spread quickly. It wasn't just about him trying to steal from me anymore. The entire web of lies he'd woven had unraveled, dragging down every person he had come into contact with. People who once trusted him, family and friends alike, were now looking at him with suspicion. He was becoming a pariah in his own life. And it wasn't just the public humiliation. Ryan was facing legal consequences now. The authorities had gotten involved, and the investigation was far from over. Everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed of, his quick escape, his freedom, was slipping through his fingers one day at a time. I sat alone in my study, staring at the pile of documents on the desk in front of me. The weight of everything I had exposed, everything I had uncovered, was starting to feel like too much. I had won, yes, but at what cost? I didn't just lose my son's respect, I lost him, period. There was no going back. The look in his eyes during the trial, anger, fear, disbelief, haunted me. But it wasn't just his anger that I felt. It was the way he had looked at me like I was the enemy, like I was the one who had wronged him, when all I had done was try to protect what I had worked so hard for. I should have expected it. I should have seen the distance growing between us all these years. But I didn't. I thought time, memories, love would be enough to hold us together. But time had eroded that bond, and now it was gone. Evelyn had been by my side through all of this, but even she couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes whenever we spoke about Ryan. She was doing her best to keep the family together, but there was only so much she could do. She couldn't fix this. Not anymore. Aiden, Evelyn said, one evening, her voice soft but steady. Have you heard from him? No, I answered, shaking my head. He one set talked to me. She nodded, her eyes downcast. He sips not going to forgive you for this, you know, not right away. He sips angry. He sips hurt, but he needs to face what he sips done. And he will. Just give it time. Time? I didn't know if time would heal this wound. I didn't know if there was a way back. All I knew was that the land was no longer the symbol of my legacy that I had wanted it to be. It had become a battlefield that had cost me the most important thing in my life, my relationship with my son. Days turned into weeks, and the legal proceedings continued. The investigation was still ongoing, but it was clear that Ryan had no way out. The evidence was stacked against him, and there was no way for him to talk his way out of it. The truth was too heavy, too obvious. But as much as I wanted to believe that Ryan's downfall was the end of this story, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real consequences were just beginning. For all the damage he had caused, for all the lies he had told, I knew that this would haunt him for the rest of his life. And I wasn't sure whether that was a kind of justice or a form of punishment. One evening I was sitting on the porch, looking out over the land. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of red and orange, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The land was still mine, but it didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like a win. I had gotten my justice, but the price had been far higher than I expected. I heard the sound of footsteps behind me and turned to see Evelyn standing there. She had a letter in her hand, and her face was unreadable. What sip's that? I asked. It's from Ryan, she said softly, holding it out to me. I took the letter, my hands trembling slightly. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me didn't want to open it. Part of me wanted to leave it unopened, pretend it didn't exist. But I knew I had to face it. For better or worse, this was the last step in what had been an incredibly painful journey. I opened the letter slowly, reading the words carefully. Dad, it began, the words awkward, distant. I don't know where to start. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you for what you did, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting myself. But I was wrong. The letter went on, filled with half apologies and broken promises. Ryan Sipp's anger was still there, but it was buried under the weight of guilt. The letter ended with a simple line that broke me. I don't know if we'll ever be able to fix this, but I hope someday you still understand why I did what I did. I sat there for a long time, holding the letter in my hands, the words sinking in. There was no resolution. There was no finality. Just a broken son, a broken father, both of us struggling to find a way back from the damage. Evelyn sat down beside me, her presence steady and grounding. It's a start, she said quietly. A start, I echoed. But as I stared out at the land, I realized that I wasn't sure if there was any way to truly heal. Maybe the land was never meant to be my legacy. Maybe it was just a place where memories both good and bad were buried. And maybe that's all it would ever be. The day the trial ended, I didn't feel like celebrating. There was no sense of relief, no joy that I had won. I had done what I set out to do. Stopped Ryan from selling the land, exposed his lies, and made him pay for his betrayal. But it didn't feel like justice. It felt like I had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Ryan's legal team fought hard, but the truth was on my side. I had the documents, the records, the witnesses who could confirm everything. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Ryan was ordered to relinquish all rights to the land, and the sale was canceled. But that wasn't enough. There were still questions, still a heavy weight hanging in the air. The case didn't end with a clear resolution for either of us. Ryan faced legal consequences, but the damage to our relationship was irreversible. The words he had written in that letter, the confusion in his voice when he looked at me during the trial, still haunted me. The boy I had raised, the son who had once looked up to me, was gone. The family I had spent my life protecting was now broken, In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting more and more on the cost of everything. I had spent so much time focusing on the land, on protecting it, that I had lost sight of what really mattered. Ryan's betrayal was painful, but in a way it was just a symptom of a much deeper problem, a problem I had helped create by pushing him away for so many years. Evelyn came to visit one evening, her face tired but resolute. She had been my rock through all of this, even when I didn't deserve her support. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Sitting beside me, I had been staring out at the land again, watching the wind stir the tall grass. I shrugged, not sure how to answer. I don't know. I should feel something, relief maybe, but all I feel is, "You did what needed to be done," Evelyn said softly, placing a hand on mine. "But you stir not just fighting for the land, are you? You were fighting for something else. For Ryan, for your family. But sometimes when we fight that hard, we forget what we stir really protecting." I met her gaze, her words sinking in. I had been so caught up in the fight, so focused on the idea of justice, that I had missed the point. Justice wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about proving I was right and Ryan was wrong. It was about understanding, healing, and finding a way to move forward. I was trying to protect my legacy, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. But maybe I lost sight of what really mattered. Evelyn nodded, her eyes soft. "Sometimes the things we fight for the hardest aren't set, the things we need the most. Maybe it sets time to rebuild, not just the land, but what dipsov's left of your family." The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. She was right. The land would never give me what I had lost. It was just a piece of dirt, a remnant of the past. But Ryan was my son, my flesh and blood, and no amount of land, no amount of victory could ever replace that. Over the next few months, I tried to reach out to Ryan. I sent letters, left messages, hoping that somehow we could find a way back to each other, but there was no response. The distance between us was too great. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. But then, one day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Ryan, postmarked from some small town I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. "Dad," the letter began, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, and I don't know if I can ever forgive myself. But I want you to know that I've learned something from all of this. You didn't lose me, Dad. I gave myself away. I took everything for granted, and now I realize how much I've lost. But I'm trying to make it right. I don't know if we'll ever be the same, but I'm ready to try, if you are." The words hit me like a wave, overwhelming in their rawness. For the first time in months, I felt something other than regret or anger, hope. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a step, a small one, but a step nonetheless. I put the letter down on the table, sitting in silence as the weight of everything settled in. I had fought for justice, for my legacy, for what I thought was right. But maybe the real justice wasn't in the courts or the land. Maybe it was in this letter, in Ryan's willingness to try, in the hope that someday we could rebuild what had been broken. I didn't know where this would lead. I didn't know if Ryan and I would ever be able to fix everything. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to fight anymore. I had done what I needed to do. Now all I had to do was wait and see if my son would come home. I walked the land again that evening, the weight of everything still heavy on my shoulders. The air was cool, the sky a deep blue, and the wind rustled through the grass in a way that almost felt like it was whispering to me. It had always been my place of peace, my sanctuary from everything else. But now it felt different, empty, almost. I had won, the land was mine again, and Ryan's betrayal was exposed for all to see. But the price had been high, too high, for all the justice I had fought for all the years of sacrifice. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something far more precious than a piece of property. I had lost my son. I stopped by the old barn, running my hand over the weathered wood. I had spent so many nights here, working late into the hours, training soldiers, remembering my own time in the field. But now it was just a memory. The work was done, and the land, my land, was nothing more than a reminder of what once was. The letter from Ryan still sat on my desk, tucked away in the drawer. I hadn't read it again since the first time. I didn't need to. The words had already sunk in. Ryan's apology wasn't a cure-all, and it wasn't going to fix everything that had been broken, but it was a start. And that was something I hadn't expected. I glanced around, taking in the familiar view. The fields stretched out before me, the horizon just a blur in the distance. I had spent my life looking at this land, thinking about what it meant, about what I could build on it. But now all I could think about was what I had lost. I had spent so much time building my legacy here, working for something that seemed so important, but at what cost? A part of me wanted to go to Ryan, to reach out, to try and rebuild what we had, but I knew it wasn't that simple, not anymore. He had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. The years of distance, of misunderstandings, of my own failures, those couldn't be undone with a few words or a letter. Dad? I heard Evelyn Sepp's voice call from the edge of the field. I turned to see her walking toward me, her face soft yet full of concern. Are you okay? I didn't answer at first. I didn't know what to say. I had told myself so many times that I was doing the right thing, that this was all for my family, for my legacy, but now, standing here, it didn't feel that way. It felt like I had been chasing something that didn't matter as much as I thought it did. Evelyn came up beside me, standing silently for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice gentle. You don't have to do this alone, Dad. I know you think this was the only way to fix things, but its setup's not over yet. I turned to look at her, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the hope in her eyes. She had always been there for me, always the one who tried to keep the family together when everything else was falling apart. But I couldn't fix this on my own. Not anymore. I don't know if there sips a way back, I said quietly, my voice tinged with regret. I don't know if Ryan and I can ever fix what sips has been broken. Evelyn smiled softly. You don't have to fix everything all at once. You just have to be willing to try. Sometimes that sip's enough. I looked out at the land again, the horizon bathed in the soft light of dusk. I had spent so many years focused on building something that I thought was important, but now I understood that it wasn't the land that mattered most. It was the people. It was the family I had spent so much time neglecting. Evelyn's words sank in. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to rebuild the trust that had been broken. I had spent so many years fighting for my legacy, but I was beginning to realize that my legacy wasn't just about what I had built here. It was about who I had built it with, and if I wanted to truly heal, I had to let go of the past and focus on the future. You should write, I said, finally meeting her gaze. Maybe there's still hope. Maybe it still's not too late. Evelyn's smile was gentle, understanding. It's never too late to start over, Dad. It's just a matter of deciding to take that first step. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The journey wasn't over. There was still so much work to do, so much to rebuild. But maybe I didn't have to do it alone. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. For me, for Ryan, for all of us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood there with Evelyn, looking out over the land that had been my battleground. It was still mine, but now it felt like more than just dirt and trees. It was a place of possibility, of change. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Maybe there was still a chance for redemption. Maybe there was still a chance to rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real legacy I could leave behind.